Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com. Welcome to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Todd Palmer. Hey, Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great, Cesar. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And before we get started, let me give our listeners and viewers a little bit of your background.
Sure.
So Todd is an executive coach, keynote speaker, renowned thought leader, author, and CEO who is committed to helping business owners tackle their obstacles and clear their path to success. As an entrepreneur and active CEO, Todd knows the struggles business owners face regarding people, cash, strategy, and execution. He took his company from being $600,000 in debt to making the Inc. 5000 as one of America's fastest growing companies, an astounding 6 times. He specializes in helping leaders join the mission statement of the organization with their personal core values while addressing fears, self-doubts, and imposter syndrome. He brings a unique blend of authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability to help leaders and organizations achieve their highest goals. And he's here today to share his story, what he's learning along the way, and his proven framework for helping business owners achieve success. Wow, that's amazing. That's definitely amazing to be able to take a company from $600,000 in debt and making it to in 5,000. That is definitely, it takes certain skills and definitely being able to stay focused in a particular path. So definitely want to know more about that. However, before we get there, I want to know about who is Todd, and let's take it back to the beginning. Where were you born, and what was it you growing up as a kid?
So I was born in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan, and when I was 5 years old, I had a very pivotal change in my life. I love the title of your show, You Can Overcome Everything, and I think I started learning that at 5 years old.
Okay.
So at 5 years old, unfortunately, my dad passed away. And within 90 days, my father is gone. My mom returns to work because she'd been a stay-at-home mom. My older brother, who's 12 years older, got an athletic scholarship out of state. So he was leaving to go to college. And my older sister was in the process of getting married. And she and her husband are moving to Arizona for his education. So literally in the mind of a 5-year-old, in 90 days, my entire world changed. All my core caregivers were gone. All the people that I depended on were gone. And what that taught me, and then I took this into entrepreneurship, was that the only person I can rely upon is myself. And that worked pretty well until it didn't. And my mom eventually got remarried. We moved out into the country. So from my formative years, I basically grew up in the middle of Michigan on a farm. I went to a very small school. I had 42 kids in my graduating class from high school.
Wow.
And so now I live in a suburb. I've moved back to the Detroit, Michigan area, and I live in a suburb out here. And I'm really excited to share the message and how we can help improve lives and how people can, love the title of the show. So happy to be here. I learned to overcome something at 5 years old, and I learned to overcome a lot of stuff in my 30s, then in my 40s. And that's part of the evolution of improving lives, that we always are overcoming something.
Yeah, and when you think about it from that perspective, like I think even with you at 5 years old being one of your first pivotal moments in life to overcome that, losing a parent and, just having a whole life change, in your immediate family, that could be very daunting, and it can definitely take somebody into a different aspect in their lives. And, being able to look at those things and say, you know what, I can and I will overcome this is not an easy thing to do, right? It definitely is not an easy thing to do by no means. And so I can only imagine going through something like that, growing up as a kid. Like, what does that do to you? So I'm just curious to know, like, at 5 years old, your dad passed away. What was, growing up, from that point forward, like, how was that for you in your day-to-day living? Like, how did that change you from who you were before to what you were now becoming?
Well, that's a great question. And, I think a lot of times when a child loses a parent, that alters a lot of different things. So I was honestly, truly, truly lucky. My mom was one of those amazing people who could be a full-time parent and a full-time employee. She worked for a big automotive company in Michigan. And I was really fortunate that she was very invested in my growth. She was very invested in my interests, whether it was sports or music or girls or whatever I was interested in. She was very much a great sounding board for me. I realized that I needed a surrogate father, so to speak. And my older brother, Greg, really stepped into that role. So when my dad passed away, he was 17 and I was 5. So that 12-year gap really put him into that father figure role. But it goes beyond that. I was so lucky. I had teachers in school. I had coaches. I had, when I went to university, I had a department head, and I was on academic scholarship, who got very invested in me and gave a lot of his time to me. When I got into entrepreneurship, I'm part of groups like EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, where we do peer-to-peer learning. So I really have, been very, very fortunate. A quick story about how I really have a greater appreciation at my age now than maybe I did then is about 2 years ago, I volunteered, myself and my girlfriend and my son, who's 20, just turned 29 yesterday.
Nice.
And his fiance, the 4 of us went out to California. And we volunteered in a maximum security prison system to teach entrepreneurship to some of the people who were incarcerated. And it was fascinating to hear when they heard that story about my life. It took them back to, a lot of them grew up in single household family environments. A lot of them didn't realize, and they were reflecting upon, wow, had I just connected with this relative or this person in my community, maybe my life would have gone a different path. Unfortunately, I connected with this group of people, or I made these choices. And it was fascinating to see how when they took my story, applied it to their lives, and then they said, thank you so much for being so honest with me. We're much more alike than we're different. And when you come in as a Inc. 5000 CEO, they kind of see you in a certain light, and they apply things to you that maybe aren't true. That it was easy for you, that you had a silver spoon, that you didn't have challenges. And when they hear the challenges and struggles that a lot of us as entrepreneurs shared with them in the safe room, they were really blown away. Like, oh my gosh, we're so much more alike than we are different. And for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, we are so much more alike. And some of these guys were running great business, quote unquote businesses, and they were massive entrepreneurial spirits. They were just guided differently. So we all have challenges to overcome in life. We all have pivots we need to make. We're coming through COVID, a lot of things to overcome through that, coming out of that piece. I'm working with a lot of clients right now, getting them to reframe success and to get them to reinvent their businesses and to redefine what maybe that surviving is the new definition of success during these tough times. So it's a lot of things going on right now.
Yeah, and I love what you mentioned. The fact that even with that experience, the group of people that you decide to be around can make a big difference, right? And obviously, you saw that through going through this thing you did in California. Even for yourself, like growing up, and the fact that your older brother stepped in, and you had teachers and you had all this stuff. So I guess, and maybe you might have covered this even when you were talking to the people in the jail. When it comes down to people, like, how critical is that, though? To really, if you were to give an advice to someone listening to this show right now, saying, like, the people you choose or the people that you hang around with, how critical is that for their success in the future?
Oh, it's so critical. It's literally who's in your tribe, who's in your, in the best application in the world, who's in your gang.
Yeah.
By the 5 people you spend the most time with. And one of the things that I've really learned is I've gone through my career, if I've put myself around people who are, I see them as, potentially quote unquote better than me, more successful, better parents, better husbands, better entrepreneurs, better leaders in the community. And I feel a need to rise to their level. And unfortunately, a lot of times we get trapped in situations where it's kind of the bucket of crabs theory. Someone's trying to get out of those environments where maybe it's not so healthy or so safe. And then the community, instead of elevating and lifting that person out of the bucket, they link together and bring him back into the bucket. And it's important, I think, for people to pay attention to that, because it happens even with entrepreneurs is, that sometimes when the world sees you as successful, they don't always recognize that there are sometimes people who are going to treat you differently because of that, or treat you negatively because of that. And you think that doesn't make any sense. Well, the 5 people you have in your tribe the most should be those people who want you to propel forward. As a parent, I want the very best for my son. I want him to have the very best life he can create for himself as possible. If he ends up being, in the eyes of society, more successful than his father, good for him. That's awesome. I mean, then in my brain, it's like, then I must have done something right. But then I reverse that. It's, what is our relationship with ourselves? A lot of entrepreneurs, believe it or not, get into business to either to prove something to someone else that they can accomplish something, or just as importantly, prove to themselves they can accomplish something. And it's often from a sense of lack, not from a sense of abundance. And so I want to prove to Cesar that I can do this and I can do that. So I'm going to, just drive and drive and drive. When the reality is, you don't care. But it's the story I tell myself. I just watched the Michael Jordan documentary and how he would always make an enemy out of his opponent to beat him. That works sometimes. I'm not saying don't do, but it doesn't work every time. So if you make your best friends your enemies, if you make your family your competition, that doesn't work really well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then in terms of you getting into entrepreneurship, and how did you stumble across that? Instead of just saying, I'm going to work for a company, just be the CEO or whatever journey, right? How did you stumble upon that? Because I think a lot of people sometimes, I was talking to somebody this week who, they're pretty much already tired of working for a company. They're afraid that they can get laid off. And so then the thing came into mind of possibly getting to become an entrepreneur, yet they don't know how to do it, right? And so before we get to what it is to become an entrepreneur, how did you stumble upon deciding, I'm going to go with this, which is more risky than having that secure paycheck, quote unquote?
Sure. Great question in regards to, as I think about and ponder the question and I'm absorbing it, it dawns on me that it really came from a place of self-awareness. I was very self-aware that I was a terrible employee. And I was terrible at internal politics, and I wasn't I wasn't that guy. I had a lot of ideas. I had a lot of things I wanted to try, a lot of things I wanted to do. And I recognized that I think I was one of the first millennials, back in the early 1990s, because I was willing to focus on freedom and flexibility because it was important. I was a single parent. I was raising my son by myself. And I knew that if I wanted to go the corporate route, that I would be giving up some of that family time and that he needed me. I was his only parent. And that was my primary driver. So I thought, okay, how can I create a life by design? How can I be a parent as often as possible? And then I said, all right, I can go into business for myself and I can create this situation. And that's the fairy tale I told myself, unaware that, I was like the Lord of the Rings movie. I was like Frodo leaving the Shire, going on this great adventure, which turned into fighting dragons and a lot of tragedy. And it's that hero's journey that I didn't know I was going to take. And the other thing that I did know is I had a great risk tolerance. So I could pick, if I fell back down, I could pick myself up. And I fell back down, I could pick myself up for a long time until like 10 years into the journey where I almost couldn't pick myself back up. And then I got $600,000 in debt.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Two things to that. I think maybe one of the driving factors, and I want to get your opinion on this. I see it for myself too, and maybe you can relate to that. Being a single parent, and also you growing up with not having a father, although your brother stepped in and you have your mom, but not having a father and kind of having just one parent growing up. I would say that for you, one of the driving factors was, I want to make sure that I'm there for my son. I want to make sure that I do what I have to do. I want to give that time, and therefore that was also possibly a deciding factor of, if I go to corporate, I'm going to be stuck with X amount of hours where I'm not going to be able to give them that time, which I didn't have. And I want to make sure they don't go through that same aspect, right?
Yeah, that's very well said. That's exactly what I was thinking. It's like, time is finite. I can only do this once.
Yeah.
I can, in theory, I can always make more money, but I can't make more time. And it was just the driving factor. But what it forced me to do is be very disciplined, which is great to be as an entrepreneur. Literally would get up at the same time every day. And I would take him to daycare. He'd be the first kid into daycare. And he was in kindergarten. He wasn't even like first kindergarten, first grade. He's like, and he would get angry. He's like, why do I have to be the first kid? I said, Sales 101. Here's the benefit of that. You'll be the first kid picked up. I promise you.
Yeah.
And nearly every day he was. So he's the first one in and the first one out. And I got super disciplined so that when I would pick him up at about 4:30, from 4:30 to 7:30, 8 o'clock was our time. So we had 3 hours. He had 3 hours of my focused time Monday through Friday, very consistently. And not a lot of kids get that from their parents. And there's a lot of great parents out there. I'm not saying my way is the only way. But then put him to bed, I'd go back to work. So then I'd work on paperwork and invoicing and everything else I needed to do from 7:30 until I was done. I'd go to bed and we start over the next day. And that was the routine. And I could not have done that if it really wasn't for me, my internal priorities being the way they were aligned. In retrospect, if a client came to me and said, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing," I would really try to counsel them maybe to do different. But I anchored in on what my true driving force was. What was the most important thing to me, and it was actually being a good dad first and a successful entrepreneur second.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned, you talked about was the hero's journey, and so. I was trying to look it up right now. I couldn't remember. And so I think that when you look at that, and for those that are listening and watching, you need to go and Google the hero's journey. There is an actual whole history behind that. And now that I think about it, that is pretty much an entrepreneur. There's 4 different phases that you're going through in this hero's journey. And depending on that journey, where you fit in, there's different things that, you're going through as part of that journey, whether you're getting temptation, whether you feel like you've been defeated, whether you feel like you're actually finally going over that hurdle, whether you're finally becoming that mentor, or in your case, you became and went out and helped other businesses grow and create this. Like there's this whole cycle of life, the hero's journey, that was created and goes into a lot of detail, which that can definitely be a different show, just kind of going over the whole aspect of that, right? But yeah, when you think about it from that perspective, that's definitely more or less what you've gone through, right? And so let's talk about getting this company from a $600,000 debt into becoming in the top 5,000.
That was part of the hero's journey for me, and when I tell that story. And when I think back on it, it was pretty incredible. But, for me, the first thing I had to do was get through the thing that had been most successful for me, which was, only rely on myself. For the first 9 years of the business, I thought I could do anything. I thought I had to have all the answers. I could do anything. I could run all the departments. I could do sales. I could do it all. And we grew and we scaled, and then I couldn't. And I'm like, and so we go back to what used to work for us, and it didn't work anymore. And I kept trying and it didn't work. And then what happened is I got this itty bitty negative committee in my head telling me how much I stink and what a terrible CEO I am. And now what a terrible parent I am. And my self-identity became attached to the business. If the business was great, I was great. If the business was terrible, I was terrible. Bringing that home to my kid, defeating the original thing I wanted to do, which is be a great dad. Now I'm coming home and being a complete jerk. And, I reached a tipping point. And my imposter syndrome was so bad, it became depressive. I couldn't get out of bed. I wouldn't go in and deal with the issues in the company. I wouldn't deal with the employees that needed to be maybe removed from the company. And I got to the point where I essentially, like anybody who's got a challenge in life, I hit bottom, my entrepreneurial bottom. And I reached out for help for the first time. And I hired a coach, which I could not afford. And he looked at my finances. He helped me get some quick financial literacy to that. He helped he started working on, he used to call it the doom loop in my head, my imposter syndrome, started replacing, I'm going to replace this tape with a better tape. Looked at my staff. He was like, yeah, you have a very underperforming staff and you've got to change as a leader. It's always inside out leadership. I couldn't change my business until I changed Todd. I got to change me first in order to be a better leader, a better CEO, a better entrepreneur. And that's what I teach my clients. It's always inside out work, because when we go inside out, we take all the complicated crap and we break it into small pieces. We simplify it. And then we take massive action around it. And we have an intention of what we wanted to have happen. My intention was to get out of $600,000 in debt. I didn't know how I was going to do it. So my coach and I would work on it. And part of that was we realized we needed to replace the team. So I fired the entire company in one day and I started over. And then we focused on that intention of getting out of debt, focused the intention of changing my thinking, created strategies around both of those intentions. And from there, we made the Inc. 5000 6 times as a byproduct, but not as a goal. It was the success of the company was a byproduct of doing the right things the right way on the intention of getting out of debt.
Yeah. And you mentioned something again that I think is critical, that and you can see this not necessarily just in business, like in reality, in anything, right? Jim Rohn talks about this too. For things to change, you have to change, right? And so we always focus on
about it,
right? And you just said it, like you have to change the inner you to have the outer aspect of that. And a lot of times we focus on the economy, we focus on we blame everybody, we blame the government, we blame whatever, right? Everything that's going outside, and the last thing we look at is ourselves, like what do we have to do, or is there anything that we need to do? And that, again, that could be in a relationship, it could be as a personal growth, it could be in business, like really in anything. And you're right, I think it comes down to change yourself, like look at what can you do, what are the things that you can change your mind, how can you look at things from a different perspective, a different lens, to make those changes, right?
Yeah, and that's really what I'm teaching CEOs. It's so many CEOs don't understand that. I'll appear on a podcast, or I'll go on stage and speak, and someone will come up to me after and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about maybe engaging you for coaching services." That'd be awesome. Yeah. So what are you looking for in a coach? First question I always ask. Well, I want if someone says to me, "I want to be on the Inc. 5000 6 times like you are," yeah, I am not that guy. That's a byproduct.
Right.
It's even sports success. Michael Jordan's success as a basketball player was the byproduct of hard practice and effort, and applied to abilities and skills and temperament and practice. And if you watch, a lot of these, even a Mike Trout or Miguel Cabrera, these great athletes, they're changing game to game. They're pivoting. They're evolving. They're changing at bat to at bat, pitch to pitch. And we as entrepreneurs have to do the same thing. It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Definition of insanity. And that's the way it really goes. And it's an awareness around, if I'm heightened and if I'm reactive, why? Well, it typically ties into fear. What am I afraid of? Well, it's COVID. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my business. I'm going to lose my home. I'm going to lose. So let's address that. Stand up and say, I'm afraid. I'm scared. That's what I had to say. I said to my coach, I'm over $500,000 in debt. I'm going to lose my house. And I shared all my greatest fears. He's like, calm down. Let's take a look at how that may not happen. And he goes, it could happen. So he's great. He validated it could happen. But let's look at the likelihood of that. And even if there's someone listening today and their business is in tough shape because of COVID, which is no fault of their own. My changes were internal changes. I made the mistakes. I made the choices. I made some missteps in 2006 to fix my business. You know what I'm doing in 2020? I'm reinventing my coaching business, because I was supposed to be on 6 different stages around the globe speaking to entrepreneurs. Well, I can't do that right now. Yeah. Doesn't mean I don't want to improve lives. Doesn't mean I don't want to help people. So how else can I do that? Well, I should go on Cesar's podcast. That's a good way to chat with folks. I can go out and do webinars. I can go out and be of service. I've done so much volunteer work in the last 60 days to get the message out. to be of help to others. So the question becomes is how do we pivot in the moment to see the opportunity within the tragedy, because it is there for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, right. And some things that come to mind is I tell people, do not allow the fear to take away the opportunity, because when people fear so many different things, then the opportunity, pretty much leaves us, right? The other thing too is one of my mentors mentioned, you got to deal with what emerges, right? So deal with what you have at that moment. And like you said, you're reevaluating, you're strategizing, you're looking at what do I need to do to still be out, and what do I need to change in my business? You're out, definitely looking at it from that perspective. And I think, again, we always forget about doing that. And, even with what we're going through right now, with all the changes, all the struggles, all of those things that for the most part, we cannot control. It's not only happening to you or me, it's happening to everybody. In some shape or form, everybody's been affected by what we're going through.
For sure.
Right. Sure. And so we just got to be able to figure out, okay, well, what can I do? I also believe that what you focus on will expand. So if I'm focusing on the negativity, I'm going to lose my business. This is not going to work out, whatever the case may be, then you're putting so much attention to that you forget about the possibilities. And a lot of times, even if there's one small possibility, then you stick with that one possibility that is positive, because then that might lead to more and more and more and more, right? And so definitely that's something that I think, we as people need to do. Now, when it comes down to people, money, and strategy, those are the three aspects that you touched on going into this company. And is that part of also a lot of the coaching that you do or consulting that you do for businesses? Are those the three pillars that you look at?
I always start with people. It's always people. And it's I've had debates with other coaches and debates with other leaders. And for me, it's just, let's not make it complicated. Life is complicated.
Yeah.
Let's just choose not to. So I really break it down like this, it's always, any problem in business is always a people business. So it's the people who make the decisions about the cash. It's the people who makes the decisions about the strategy and the execution. It's the people who choose not to pivot when things are coming at them. And it's people who choose which companies you want to work with, what other people you want to work with. And it's people who choose the staff that are going to be on your team. So I always say to my leaders that, let's say my business isn't growing, my revenue's flat. Perfect. We can totally address that. Let's take a step back. What do you think it is? And they're going to go down. It's the marketplace. It's my niche. It's this. It's that. Could be. Who's in charge of all that? Which person is in charge? And let's dig in with them a little bit. 99 out of 100 times, the bottleneck in every organization is at the top. It's the CEO. It's the entrepreneur. It's the leader. So think about it. If you're sitting with the CEO and his 5 executives or his 10 executives, and he always speaks first, and he or she wants a bunch of yes men around them, well, there really is just one leader. First is, I always train my leaders to speak last. Go around the room, solicit the best ideas. Then, if there's an idea that's better than your idea, the great thing is you never have to tell anybody. You can just say, I just love Cesar's idea. We're going to go with his. Next topic. Perfect. You can say, wow, versus you putting your idea out there first. Cesar may never speak his idea. Well, that's bad business. That's 10 people going in one direction is very powerful versus one person going in a direction, pulling 9 other people behind them. So It's the power of the team. But I just, for me, again, I go back to my experiences. The bottleneck in the company was me. We couldn't fix the business until we got Todd unstuck. So if I can get the leader unstuck, and you can realize, like a guy on my website, perfect example, his name is Tom. Once he made changes to his leadership team, his first year with me, and those are tough, and he even puts in the testimonial video, those are tough calls. His business grew 70% revenue, 500% profit. I mean, but if he got the wrong people off the team, got the right people on the team, he was able to just, blow that thing up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And you're right. Now that I see it, and I made some comments here, people is the driving factor of the money or the strategy or whatever is going on. And so a lot of times we focus on, well, my marketing is not working too good or some sort of tangible or different aspect of it. When in reality, when I see it from that perspective, now that I think about it, somebody initiated that. So
I love the marketing because everybody says that my marketing sucks or my marketing is working, my sales are this, right? Revenue. All right. So if your marketing isn't working, what are your measurables? What are your KPIs? Are you watching the proper numbers? And if a number is off, who do you go to? What other human being expert do you know that you can go to get feedback? So if your click-throughs are low or your downloads on your podcast aren't who knows how to move that number up? I got wrapped up in thinking I needed to know all that. What I figured out is, no, I don't need to know all that. I need to know who to ask. And I need to go to that guy and say, hey, I want to grow my podcast. How do I best do that? And it's not some schlocky program I see on Instagram for $1,000. I'll tell you the 10 secrets. That's nonsense. It's what are the proven strategies to grow? And typically, proven strategies take time. Like I said, I'm redoing my entire stuff. I'm laying out a 3-year runway of pivot and change. I've literally step by step laid it out. And what I did is I went and talked to somebody who's already done it. And I bought him coffee. And he told me everything I needed to know for free. Why? Because I gave him something first.
Yeah.
And he said, read this book called Content Inc. by Joe Paluzzi. And this will tell you everything you need to know. And there's the guy who told me, his name was Kyle. Kyle grew his business from 0 to $30 million.
Wow.
And he's recession proof and he's COVID proof. So I'm looking, all right, who do I know who's not suffering like others? And he goes, do this. And he goes, here's the deal. It's not hard. It's boring. And there's no bright and shiny pieces to it. It's not super sexy. And you're not going to wake up every day, super excited. It's rigid, disciplined steps and processes done the right way to the right audience repeatedly. And that's how he has 100 million visitors to his website every year and 600 million hits. Wow. So I went to somebody who knows more than I do to get information. And he was more than generous enough to just share with me how he did it. And he goes, I'm not going to do it for you, but if you he goes, and if you don't want to do it, you need to hire these kind of people. These are the questions you ask them. So you don't go with the pretenders and the posers. You go with the people who have actually done it.
Yeah. I love that. And this is the same kind of model that Henry Ford built his company upon, right? He didn't know anything. He was surrounded by people that had the actual expertise in a particular area. He just knew how to connect and build those relationships. And it was really up to them on how they created that. And that's how he became.
And he listened. Yeah. He listened. God forbid he listened, It's like, I remember seeing this interview probably, oh my gosh, 15 years ago with Larry Bird when he was head coach of the Indiana Pacers. The reporter was really thought he had like the gotcha question. He's like, Larry, you've never been a head coach anywhere. We know you're a great Hall of Fame basketball player, but you really don't know what you're doing. Why should the Indiana Pacer fans have faith in you that you're going to know what you're doing? He's like, hey, you know what? You're absolutely right. I've never coached anywhere. These 6 assistant coaches I have are all head coaching experience. My job is to listen to them. My job is to get their input. Then my job is to make better decisions. That's my job. That's brilliant.
It is.
Going back to your question from a while ago, if you surround yourself with the right people giving you the right input, and you can be the BS defector of, okay, well, that makes sense and that sounds ridiculous, and you can make those choices and make decisions. A CEO at the end of the day really does 2 things. They remove bottlenecks for the company to grow and survive and thrive. So they remove bottlenecks. Second thing they do is they just make it easy. They make it easy for someone to work for you, or you make it easy for someone to do business with you. That's really all you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely, I really, really like that. And, again, going back to just understanding and knowing that, I think is critical. And part of what you just mentioned too is like when you were getting this advice, he said, it's not difficult, it's boring. The human condition is that we tend to not do those things that look boring. We tend to, because it looks boring, it's like, I got to do this again. Like, it's as simple as, when you think about it from, you want to be healthy, right? And you know that you shouldn't be eating fries, or you shouldn't be doing, hamburgers, or whatever the case may be. And you know that that's very simple to do, but it's lazy. It's like, nah, it's there, and you're drawn to doing that, and you forget to keep up with your diet or whatever the case may be. And so anything we do, right, it's like we tend to not deal with the things that seem very simple, very easy. It seems like we to an extent want things that are complicated. We like it hard. I forget where I was reading this. and maybe it was part of so I'm also an NLP practitioner, so it's probably part of that, where you have this drama cycle. Like, people want to be part of that drama cycle. They want to be either
absolutely, the hero,
right,
the villain, the whole triangle.
yeah, exactly, right. And so you want to be part of that. It's like, you shouldn't be there, but no, today I want to be the victim, or tomorrow I want to be the perpetrator, or tomorrow I want to be, the rescuer. Like, you want to be part of that, because that's like the human condition. When you step out of that, then that's when you really look at it from a different perspective, right? And I think people just keep going and going and going with that cycle, which is crazy.
Well, and I think part of the reason why they do that cycle is the way the brain fires. What chemicals do we receive? Do we get a spike of dopamine when we rescue somebody?
Yeah.
Or do we get a spike of dopamine when we are rescued by somebody, when we're the victim? Entrepreneurs are always accused of, and it's often very true, of chasing the bright and shiny things, because they feed us. And a lot of entrepreneurs are really good at early stage in growing companies up. Entrepreneurs have a very difficult time pivoting to being CEOs. Now, we can put the title on our business card or on our website or whatever we want, but running a publicly held company is a different discipline than starting a company. And it's important to recognize that there's all these inflection points as companies grow where they reach that ceiling of complexity. That's usually when I get brought in, is when they reach the ceiling of complexity. Like me, like my business got to a certain level, and I couldn't get beyond that until I hired a coach. And we break through that level and break through to that level. That's why they bring in the outside observers, because we're not emotionally attached to it. So many family-owned businesses have the wrong family members working in them. I got cousin Bob or my sister Sue is working here, and all they're doing is creating drama, and they're not adding any value. It literally had one client, two brothers. I'm like, the deal is, brother one, who I interacted with the most, was a rock star. He was doing a lot of the right things in a lot of the right ways. And his other brother, the jealous brother, there was a saboteur coming in and destroying everything. I said, what does he make? He makes $250,000 a year. Can you afford to pay him to stay home and not come in? Because all he's doing is destroying what the rest of the family is building. And ultimately, that's what they had to do. So going back to it, it always comes down to people.
Yeah, no, I definitely love that. If you were to go back and look at what were some of the lessons you've learned throughout your journey up to this point, what were some of those lessons?
So one of the first lessons, going back to the people statement, was I used to always hire people in my recruiting business with a recruiting background. The 6-time Inc. 5000 company is a company named Diversified Industrial Staffing, recruiting and temporary help company at that point. And I used to only hire people with recruiting or HR backgrounds. And when I pivoted, came up with a different process called hire for DNA, not for resume. Mm-hmm. So I would take people from restaurant and retail and other sectors and bring them in because they match the core values of the company. They match the DNA of the company. So their DNA matched the company DNA. Then we would teach them to be great recruiters. And that worked a whole heck of a lot better than bringing in bad habits from other companies. That was one of the first things. I think the other big takeaway I got during the turnaround was focus on the margin, not the revenue. You can do if you do 20 million in revenue at 10% margins, that's not really good. If you can do 10 million in revenue at 40% margins, that's a whole lot better. The reality is less than 5% of all companies in America ever reach $1 million or more in revenue. And I counsel my clients on this constantly. If you're a rock star company, if you're doing 800,000 in revenue, but your margins are 50%, you've got a pretty good life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they're the internal, itty bitty negative.
It is the revenue, the top line.
Yeah. They think of if I just do, guy said to me, if I do 2 million in revenue, I'll make $1 million. And I said, there's a ceiling complexity you reach, and there's a scalability tipping point. I said, that's what you think on the outside. Let's dig into that. Let's dig into the numbers. As people make decisions based upon data-driven points. He's like, in order to, that jump point is going to require a lot more human capital, a lot more investment. So actually, for about a 3-year run rate, my margins are going to go down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to do that. So no, I don't blame you. Why would you want to do that? Just for the extra hassle, or just to tell your friends at the country club you've got a $10 million company or whatever the number he was chasing was.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Todd, before I let you go, I would love to continue this, but I also appreciate your time. So I know you have things going on. But before we get going, I want to know, how can people connect with you if they wanted to connect with you? And what are some of the things that you offer for people or businesses?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the question. If anybody, a couple of things. One thing I'm happy to offer anybody who's heard me on the show today, reach out to me and say, I just want to have a conversation with you. I'm happy to give you 30 minutes of my time. I just did a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I talked to a woman this morning she was, God, where was she? She's like in somewhere in South Africa. She had a very thick accent and she just wanted to start her first company. And so within 30 minutes, we figured out that if she just goes onto Upworks and freelancer.com, she had a legal background and she can reverse engineer. She can have her own business by the end of the week. And she was ecstatic. So sometimes people just call me for things like that. So I love that. So feel free to reach out. Most of my coaching that I do on a compensated basis is with entrepreneurs and CEOs who want to work inside out, who realize they've reached the ceiling of complexity and they want to grow and scale their companies while also creating a life by design. And that require, the model is really simple. I do 4 calls a month for 30 minutes. And then I do a 4-hour deep dive quarterly session with either the leader or the leader and his leadership team. And we lay out, it's really simple. We do inside out work. We figure out where you want to go, why you want to get there, what are your core values, what do you stand for? And I hold their butts massively accountable because entrepreneurs are terrible at holding themselves accountable. So going back to your diet thing, it's like, well, I want to lose 15 pounds and add 5% muscle mass. Okay, great. Just shoot me a copy of your diet every day. What? Well, that's what you said you wanted. I mean, that's the great thing about it. It's like, this is his goal. Oh, really? Oh, well, I'm not sure I'm going to do that. Well, then don't put it as a goal. Either stand up and fight for what you want and live the life you want to live. I mean, I've got people whose marriages are failing. Client comes to me, I think I might get a divorce. Okay, well, that's always an option. Tell me why. And we went through it, and a lot of it is not her issues, but his issues. So I said, the first thing you're going to do is go talk to your wife. Tell her what a life by design looks like. Well, what if she rejects me? I said, well, you're going to divorce her a half hour ago anyways. Does it really matter? Turns his life around. They're now galvanized or working on a life plan together. So that's what I help people do.
Wow. Love it. I love it. Oh, that's awesome. So do you have a website where they can connect with you or
yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. Please reach out to me at todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. So if someone wants to reach out to me, go through one of those platforms or just email me directly. Again, todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. Mention that you heard me on Cesar's show. And I'm happy to give you some time, or if you're looking for a coach, I'm happy to do a diagnostic to see if I'm a good fit for you.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And then in terms of one last tip that you can give us, you've given us a lot of great tips. If someone's going through some sort of challenge right now, whatever that might be, what is one thing that they can do to more or less overcome that challenge, whatever that might be?
I think a couple things come to mind. First thing is ask for help from a trusted person. And if you don't have a trusted person in your life, ask a trusted stranger. Sometimes we're much more honest with people we don't know because the perception of rejection and judgment is reduced. For people who are struggling and are more self-directed, I'm a big believer in being a lifelong learner through podcasts, through YouTube videos, through books. I mean, I've read more books in the 2 months of COVID than I probably read in the last 15 years because I've just got the time and I'm fired up and I want to learn. I'm reading content take like Kyle suggested. So I can just, there's solutions out there. And I think it's a great way to end the conversation is you can't overcome anything if you want to bad enough. And if you're willing to recognize your self limits, and if you have limits, reach out. There's plenty of coaches, there's mentors, there's people who want to help, but you've got to raise your hand and ask for it.
Yeah. I love that. Definitely. I love that. So yeah, ask questions and definitely they need to check you out. And if anyone has any questions, they should try to reach out to you to see if there's a good fit for them and you to work together. So Todd, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate our conversation today. So thank you.
Cesar, thank you for having me. It was fun to be here.
Awesome. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure you check us out on any platform where you can hear a podcast. Also come out to this particular podcast and leave us a comment and like and share. And until next time, stay tuned for the upcoming podcast coming up. Have a good day.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you tuned in to this podcast. You can find me at Spreaker.com, where you can like and subscribe. And to learn more about myself and my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at Facebook under Cesar R. Espino. Once again, thanks for joining me. I am looking forward to having you at the next episode, and know that you truly can overcome anything.